Then let's quickly see Taraba State. Nigeria may face a shortage of agricultural produce in the coming months as severe flooding continues to ravage farmlands across the country. In the northeastern state, Taraba, farmers are being forced to harvest their immature crops. They feel this will save them from possible starvation. TVC's Sarah Ayeko is in some flood-ravaged communities to capture the farmers' plight.
If this is your first time in Taraba State, you will easily be enthralled by the beautiful clouds and intimidating mountains conjoined at a distance. Even frequent visitors and indigents of the warrior clan cannot get enough of the beauty and shield nature has preserved for decades. But beneath the lush green and beautiful mountains, as well as the things that make the indigents and residents of this state happy, lies the pains of many locals along the southern part of Taraba. Floods of pain caused by heavy rainfall and the overflowing of the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon.
And all the houses submerged, all the farmlands are submerged. So we are left with a horrible problem of starvation for the coming year. And we need serious assistance from the federal government to be able to help.
To the locals, it is a familiar enemy that comes to steal time and whatever is in its wake, killing the helpless and destroying homes and farmlands. This year, it has become more ferocious, perhaps the worst the state has witnessed in recent times.
The government says not less than 14 persons have been killed, with a number of persons still missing.
Muna abinci akan ruwa, muna zauna akan ruwa, ba abin da muka dauka cikin ruwa sai asara kawai muka samu. Yayan mu ma wayansu ma ba mu same su a koshin lafiya ba, mun same su a rashin lafiya saboda ruwa. Yanzu ba inda muke zama sai kan ruwa muke zama, kullun a yau mai ba inda muke zama. Akan ruwa inji ko ina injin yana tafiya kai ina yawo da mu muna bule a saman shi kawai. In ya zo kasuwa muna zuwan kasuwa. In ya je ina dai sunan mu dai tafiya kawai. In ya zo tudu mu haura tudu, ya je ruwa sunan mu ruwa. Zaman da muke yi kenan kullun a yau mai. Gonakin mu ko daya babu, mu ma muna yawo haka kaman sunsu. Ba inda muke zama. Yan makaranta duka yanzu ba halin tafiya makaranta. Don hankalin mu na jikin gona ne. Gona babu, kifi babu, komi babu sai yawa kan ruwa. Ba abin da zamu yi mu samu ci da yaya mu da yan makaranta ma wai su ba su samu sun tafi ba. Muna so abu da yawa. Da gona, da jirgi, da gida, da taimako yan makaranta duka.
A matsayin na manomi na yi asaran gona, na yi asaran kanina wadda muke uwa ɗaya da shi ya tafi ruwa, gida babu. A rayuwa dai yanzu sai dai mu je inda muka taba zama dai mu je mu neman me za mu shi mu dawo cikin wayansu mu zauna. To shine muke nema har yanzu dai gwamnatin Taraba ta tsaya mana akan wannan da taimaka mana akan taimakon da take yi.
The locals are scouting for what to eat. The floods come with a great consequence for food security, leaving tears in its wake.
We get trouble. All our planning, we not even get to say we go far bush farm because of the kidnappers. We don't plan for near our houses. One who can get what we can eat, see what rain can do for us. We are crying. Now we are staying in hunger. All our budget is for here. But the water can't collect it. That is why we are crying for government, including local government, state government, and federal government. That is why we are crying on behalf of our people. We dey wahala, we dey suffer, seriously.
Dr. Haruna is a rice farmer in Gasol local government area of the state. He and his siblings are racing against time, harvesting what's left of their rice field. With a boat, they paddle through the floods in a bid to rescue their crops.
Wani su ba lafiya, wani suna da lafiya. Ga yanayin abu, ga kuma yanayin gonan, ruwa ya ci, abun da muke fama, gashi nan sai abun da muke yi kuma ba muna ta roƙon Allah da ya taimaka mana ya kawo mana saukin abubuwan. Muna son gwamnati ta taimaka mana da wannan hali. In dai akwai alfarman da za a iya taimaka mana da mu ma mu zama mu tashi mu yi, sannan kuma da taimaka mana mu ma mu ga mun tashi mun taimaka mana ƙasa da mu so that mu ci gaba. Tallafin da muke so gwamnati ta mana gaskiya yana da yawa. iri babu, abincin ci ma kayi noman ma wani babu, wani gashi nan da lafiyansa ba abincin ci, ya tashi ya nema kuma ba hali, wani ka tashi ka nema ma ana kashe ka. Gaskiya muna son gwamnati da taimaka mana da ta kawo mana karshen wayannan abubuwan, ko kuma zaman lafiya dai faru da mu, ko kuma ba mu san ya abun yanzu zai kasance da mu ba, amma muna fatan Allah ya kawo mana sauki duka da mu da su duka, kuma Allah ya ba su haɗin kai da su yi mana mu gani mu ma mun karu da shi. Shine fatan alherin da na nema a gurin gwamnati, inda hali kenan su taimaka mana.
Somebody's in their need, some people have died. So we're trying to help them, at least to have food to feed, and then relocate them. And we have supplied a lot of materials to them all over the state, trying to see how we can help. We have also written the federal government to assist us, because we definitely need a lot of assistance to be able to rehabilitate the people, to be able to give them enough food to eat, to be able to provide shelters for them. And in some instances, we have to, as a matter of necessity, to relocate them to a higher plane.
Recent heavy rainfall has had major impacts on communities and states across Nigeria. One of such states is Taraba State. We're in Ibi local government area of the state, and we understand that floods have taken over farmlands and houses in about 12 local governments out of 16 local governments in the state. We're trying to speak with some of the locals here to tell us how much this has impacted their lives and livelihood. I have one of these women here. She tells me that in her own compound, about 5 persons have died. The government has told us that about 300,000 persons displaced across communities around this local government. So how have you been affected by this flood? Talk to us.
Wannan ruwa da kika ganshin nan ya ci mutum sama da 100 a Ibi local government banda gidaje. Sannan a cikin gidanmu mutum 5 a ruwa sun mutu. Jirgi muna tsaye, jirgi ya nuta da su. Jirgin na ya nuta da su, mutum sama da 30 a jirgi ɗaya an mutu. A gidanmu duka gawan ma 3 muka gani ba mu ga 2 ba. Sannan kuma gidaje mutane, gonaki, in ba gwamnati ta sa hannu ta tallafa ba, wani ma zai kawo sanadin mutuwan sha Ibi local government, saboda gonaki gaba ɗaya babu. Ciyaman ƙaraman hukuma da sarkin Ibi su yanzu suka nemi gidaje, suka ba ma mutane, suka fake, suke neman abinci suke basu. Duk inda kika sani gonaki a yankin Ibi gaba ɗaya babu shi. Duk inda gona ike babu shi. Akwai wanda ya zuba sama da miliyan 40-30 na shinkafa, babu shi. Kuma har yanzu ruwan nan yana cin ran mutane, yana kashe mutane. Amma sarkin ciyaman ƙaramin hukuma da sarkin gari shine suke kama mutane ɗoki. Yanzu daga nan har ya tafi har Damfar, har sarkin kudu babu gonan mutum ɗaya wanda ya rage. Wannan gona ne na ɗan mutum. Ruwa ya ci kowane irin kabila, ruwan nan ya kashe. Wallahi gidanmu mutum 5 suka mutu a gidanmu a cikin ruwa, mutum 5.
The state government has regularly attempted to try to assuage the challenges that people, displaced people and others face. They've always provided humanitarian supplies like food items and non-food items where we need to reconstruct buildings and the like. But at this very moment, this flood in Taraba State is unprecedented. We haven't had it like this for the past decade. The only thing near this one happened in the year 2012. So it appears it has a decade cycle when this thing keeps recurring. So, but we didn't expect that the damage done will be this much. At the moment,
Along the Jalingo-Wukari Federal Highway, bridges are under immense pressure from the flood. This is Namne Bridge in Gasol local government area of Taraba State. After it was rehabilitated, it is becoming weak and the concrete supporting the bridge is gradually giving way.
As the floods continue to ravage communities here, the echoes of their pleas are resounding to save communities from extinction. Sarah Ayeku, TVC News, Taraba.
All right, gentlemen, we just saw frustrated residents of the state and the governor who is asking for urgent intervention.
Yes.
Do we just regard this as humanitarian crisis?
It is humanitarian, and there are some factors that are human, that are induced by our failures to do what we ought to do. When natural disasters would happen, because rain will fall, the wind will blow. But when we understand the role of agencies, government, people in mitigating disaster, we will do better. With what we were just talking about Kogi now, and I was nearly getting angry. But look at what has happened in Taraba. And I am worried that these issues are not as reported as they should have been.
Yes.
I am unhappy.
They are clearly underreported.
These are humanitarian crisis that we should be taught. If this happens in other countries, we will be helping them to hype it. Look at the disaster. And I am sure that states like Benue will not be free from this.
Of course.
States like Gombe will partake in this. That woman was telling us the impact of what has just happened for us in years to come. She made it clear that starvation is a possibility now because all farmlands are destroyed. She said farmers invested 30 to 40 million naira in farms and everything. Banks will come after those ones. And when banks do, they won't be able to farm for the next season. And then food price will go up. Then we will now blame everything on inflation. Whereas these are some of the factors causing these terrible living conditions for Nigeria. Why is it that we were unable in all these states, all these communities, all these towns to do anything to prevent this kind of damage? Was it that we didn't see it coming? Climate change, yes. But is it that there is nothing anybody or any agency anywhere could have done to help these people? I disagree. There should have been something we should have been able to do.
Your take, Bikio.
Yeah, I am really troubled at the extent of this flooding problem. And it seems to me like our agencies that naturally should intervene when these sort of things happen are already overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. Because who is helping them in Taraba, for example? We are only about 4 local governments are safe from flooding. You know, only 4 are safe. Who is helping them? And that is the 3rd largest state in Nigeria by landmass. So you can imagine the extent of the problem in Taraba. You know, so this thing is a big problem. It's taking so many lives in our country this year, and we have to mitigate the pains that our people are going through. And we have to also do our best to ensure that flooding of this level do not happen again.
All right, gentlemen, joining me now via Zoom to throw more light on this issue is renowned environmentalist and conversionist Desmond Majokodumi. Welcome to the program, Mr. Desmond.
Thank you.
All right. I'm sure you must have been listening to our conversation. Now, let me ask you, what is the role of climate change in all of this?
The role of climate change is basically just expressing our own negativities. And I must say that the report of both the states was absolutely heart-wrenching, extremely worrisome, because it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again and again, and it's going to get worse. But also, I must give full kudos to the gentlemen and ladies of the fourth realm. At least it was covered. It should have been reported more, but it's not easy to go out there into these disaster zones and to cover these disasters, putting your own life and safety at risk, and also putting you under tremendous stress. So I really, congratulate our media. However, the reality is that we humans have brought about this climate change. This type of unprecedented flooding. Several of them said they've never ever seen anything like it. Another person said similar thing in 2018. Probably that's because it coincided with an El Nino year, which is when the earth gets naturally hotter for about 9 months and then goes down for a few years, comes back again. El Nino is still coming. However, this climate change and the effects, well, we were warned about this over 40 years ago by meteorological scientists attached to the United Nations, geologists and other great thinkers with all the equipment. The only thing is that they got it a little bit wrong. They said these sort of things would start happening in about 50 years. Instead, it happened 10 years earlier. And 20 years ago, they were blowing the alarm even louder. By 2015, there was the Paris conference and they were blowing the alarm and saying, yes, climate change will cause this. And it's the most simple of science. We understand this from primary school. In fact, we understand it from just being in our mother's kitchen as children. That, by the way, when you apply heat to water, the water evaporates. The more heat, the more evaporation. If you have more evaporation, you have heavier rain. 2 plus 2 equals 4. So the science, obviously, it's a bit more complex than that, but the reality is that that's what's happening. We've been polluting the atmosphere of this earth for decades upon decades, in fact, for over a century. And the pollution has continued and continued, and we're upsetting an extremely delicate, meticulously placed atmospheric balance that makes this planet one of, in fact, if not the only livable space entity. And believe you me, there's millions of them around now. Because of the technology we have, we've been able to assess that there's galaxies with millions. This is the only one that has the capacity to maintain life as we know it. And the overriding reason why it has that capacity is the delicate, complex balance of gases in our atmosphere. And one of those aspects of it that the gases do is it gives this earth a specific temperature within specific ranges. The pollution that we've been pumping there and pumping there has now heated it up beyond the normal average temperature. And it's going up. And that's why by 2015, the scientists were panicking. And they were saying, look, this thing is real, it's serious, it's going to get bad. And not only is it going to get bad, but if we push it to a certain limit, the process becomes unstoppable. Look, you can't fight nature. You can't fight nature. They just experienced it in Florida, in America, where, by the way, I must give kudos to the operations there. They were very effective. Helicopters were coming in. They were saving people. They even saved one woman and her dog inside the helicopter. But yeah. They saw this hurricane. It was a hurricane, which is a lot more dramatic because it comes and it creates chaos, especially if it's coming off the sea. So there was a hurricane coming in, Hurricane Ian, and with all their wonderful technology, they knew when it was coming, they knew where it was coming. They couldn't slow it down for half of a second. So you can't fight nature. And that's what the Secretary General of the United Nations said. He said that mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal. So it's a signal, it's a message to us that we have to change our whole attitude and ways. And there's many manifestations. For instance, the issue that was very well highlighted by the esteemed journalist there about, Cameroon. Also deciding, okay, the water's too much, you must release. No, that's not the way to do it. We're all our brothers. We're all brothers and sisters. Just because we're speaking a slightly different, a different language. But the differences between us are minute. Do you know that the difference between a typical tribesman in Nigeria and a typical tribesman in the Cameroon, when you take the DNA, the genetic difference is less than 1%. Yes, the difference between Igbo and Yoruba is less than 1%. 99% of our genetic makeup is exactly the same. There's just some external differences. And then we allow cultural taboos to come in and all kinds of things. And then we can't even behave like our brother's keeper. From time, the Cameroon people should have known, okay, yeah, this thing is coming. Let's work with the Nigerians now, how to do measured, slow release as much as possible. And meanwhile, the Nigerians are receiving it. But also, apart from the climate change, which we humans have caused and brought upon ourselves, the massive desolation and destruction of the biospheres there. That is the massive deforestation. And in some areas where we have these mangrove swamps, terrible amounts of this sand filling. All these things are also affecting, because I believe that there's some of those rivers, the banks and the bottom, the bed of the river has been raised because there's been more erosion, because the trees that used to prevent the erosion with their root zone have been long since cut off, because people are looking for firewood to cook their food when kerosene should be available, and even other more cleaner systems are available, but they're not being practiced. So, you know, it's us. We have brought this upon ourselves. And basically what's happening, we've come to a crux. Nature is saying, okay, humanity, you've done enough. You've done enough, and I must give you back what you're doing. And if you don't change, I'm going to give it back harder and harder until you do change. And the changes are all there. It's all there in our scripture. It's not very complex. You know, the scripture says that we should love God above all else. The scripture says, peace be unto you. Love your neighbor. Are we doing this? No. And because we're not doing this, nature, who is the ultimate mother of us all.
Let me ask you one question. A little over a month ago, in Katsina State, ice flakes came over farmlands.
Oh, ice flake in Katsina. My brother, you've been to Katsina, eh? It's a hot place, so. What more warning do you want? That's why the Secretary General of the United Nations, he said that the alarm bell is blowing loud. It can't even blow louder. They've said it and they said it. They have access to all the info. He can pick up the phone and he can say, okay, what was the average rainfall in Lagos in 1997? Boom, within minutes he has it. Or show me a photograph of the desert area in Yobe State 40 years ago. Show me photograph 40 hours ago. Bim, he's got it. So he has access to all the information and he's panicking. But there's hope. There's hope because we're seeing some coming together now. Yeah, some international groups. One of them is being driven very strongly by King Charles of the UK, who has been an advocate for nature, advocate for environment, just like his father for many, many, many decades. So there's some pressure groups now coming together and saying, look, money must be made available to countries that are going to be hard hit by this climate change issue. Those monies will be used for adapting, developing very rapid systems, like in Taraba State, some dam systems would help. If we build our own dams and then we can receive some of the waters that are released. Likewise in the other states, there's systems that can be put in place to help us to adapt. Lagos also is under risk from coastal erosion, and then also to mitigate, so that we ourselves will now start to transit to cleaner energy systems, to better waste systems, to more healthy lifestyle systems in our development, so-called development.
All right, Desmond. In the case of Kogi State, what can the state government do?
Well, they need to go all out. I mean, if I was the governor there, I would dedicate all my allowances and the allowances of all my people in my assembly towards getting relief materials for the people. That's just what has to be done. We can't allow these people to go through all that. And then on a sort of a medium term, they have to look at more suitable agricultural activity. And it was so painful to see all those lands just wiped out, But there are certain types of agric systems that will work in a more flooded area. And they're going to have to relocate a lot of those people. And then massive tree planting in the catchments, in some of the catchment areas will help. But the main thing is just to recognize that we have a problem on our hands and we need to come together as brothers and sisters to solve this problem. The solutions are there, but they need to be done practically. Like a classical example of how a solution has not done very well was that decades ago, there was money allocated for planting millions of trees in the desert area, okay? Because that'll help to alleviate it a bit. And instead of the trees getting planted, the people who are handling the money, they planted a lot of mansions in their places and so on. But that was, some decades back. I don't want to mention names. There's no point. But even more recently, they had this project called the Green Wall, Desert Wall, which Nigeria was supposed to be spearheading. And we haven't done as well as we should with that. We need to take this thing far, far more seriously. We need to wake up. Look, there's a fundamental reality, and we're seeing it being expressed by nature right now, that God is not mocked. Whatsoever you sow, you reap. That's basic, fundamental. It's in science, it's in physics, it's in metaphysics. Action begets reaction. So whoever is responsible for caring for the people better do it very, very well. And every iota, every ounce that was given for that caring better be deployed to that, because it's going to come back. This is just basic, fundamental physics and metaphysics. It's there in every scripture. It's there in the Bible, the Holy Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, you name it. Anything that's worthy of being called scripture that expresses the thoughts and the words of the Almighty, it is there. The law of retribution. So now is the time.
We are approaching the end of the year. Desmond, we're approaching the end of the year. I'm just wondering, how much longer can the people of Kogi State, for example, how much longer can they stay underwater? Because NIMET has told us to even expect more flooding.
I know. Expect more floods. And at the time when the rains should be easing off now, and they're coming even heavier. It's really, we need to generate more information on this, and we need to appeal to the compassion of Nigerians. And that gives me hope, because we're a very, very compassionate people. You just see a small little accident on the side of the road, people will rush and help and so on, We need to create more awareness, because those people, my brother, they go suffer there. And it's not of their making, apart from a bit of irresponsible deforestation, which again, if the awareness had been brought to them, save your forest, protect your forest, plant more trees, then they would have cooperated, So yeah, what can be done is just we need to maybe start a big awareness campaign and alert for the brothers and sisters and especially the children. What have the children done to deserve this? None of this is anything to do with their own decisions, and yet they're the most vulnerable. So I think, we as Nigerians and media, and I'm so glad that this organization is dedicating this kind of time, and then you worthy journalists are also dedicating a lot of time and effort. And as I said earlier, I've been on one trip with one journalist once to Yobe State, and I know what you guys go through sometimes just to get the breaking news, just to cover the story. But I think if we push it out more, we'll be able to get more support for these people. And maybe we have to appeal to the international organization, to Oxfam and so on, because it's a serious matter. One's heart really breaks for the poor people there. But it can get better, and it should get better, and by God's grace, it will certainly get better when we come together as brothers and sisters, fighting a common cause. It's our life support system, for God's sake. We shouldn't be wrecking it. We should be nurturing it. We should be replenishing it.
In some of the states in our country, we see clearly that the drainage architecture cannot take in as much water as we are seeing these days. I know that it is expensive to construct dikes, to even come up with primary, secondary, and tertiary channels at this time. Are there other things that we can do? Because I'm just wondering, just how do we come out of this mess, especially looking at the pictures from Kogi State. I'm just wondering, how do we come out, since we can't even begin to build dikes and the rest of them now? That is time consuming and capital intensive. What can we do?
Yes, no, you're absolutely right, my brother. We were warned, and we didn't take the warning seriously. We ignored it and so on. And now the thing has come to hit hard, very, very, very hard. And the thing about the dikes, they're a little bit time consuming. In terms of the funding, as I said, if we come together as a more unified group at this meeting that's coming up, there's the COP27 meeting that's coming up in Egypt. This is a conference of the parties over climate change. And all the world governments will be represented. It's a United Nations meeting. And the Secretary General is also pushing that funding should be deployed to countries that have been hard hit. Countries like Nigeria, which is in a vulnerable location because of the desert area and our coast and so on. So if we can come together as a unified voice, even if it's just the West African countries, and I do believe that Nigeria can lead on this, and we come together and say, yes, we're here now, we want to get funds for our adaptation, and we're going to deploy it in such and such a way, and we come up with good plans. That's the deployment will be done, and it will be done, in a way that is credible and that can be easily monitored. So, at least for next year, in preparation for next year and the year after, because the rains are coming back, they will pass. And that's the good news, that, we're expecting more heavy rains, but that's going to come in the next few weeks. There's going to be more flooding there. And that's why the immediate thing is just to go in there and evacuate people, put up IDP camps if we can, and so on, and try to at least save lives and especially prevent disease from breaking out. Because as you know, my brother, this, when there's too much water that's stagnant, it can lead to another thing. That's what's happening in Pakistan right now. So the immediate thing is just to reach out to the people with whatever funds can be raised and to evacuate as many as we can to a safer place. And then when the flood goes, because it will go, that's the good news. The good news is that the water will stop, the rain will stop falling, the water will recede. Then we now come in with fast measures. There's certain type of dike systems which can be developed over a 6-month period if we're very serious about it. Get the right kind of machineries in there, and also some types of giant pipes. It can be done, but we have to decide to do it, and then the journalists have to cover it and make sure that it's done. We have to shine our eye.
Talking about shining our eye, I was wondering, every year we have these tree planting days, and we do a lot of coverage as journalists. We go everywhere, everybody is planting tree and doing. But how long does it take trees to grow? And why are we not seeing the trees? Because I think if we are really planting trees, we should be fighting the certification. But what do you think is happening? Are we just doing mere shows and not really doing the right thing? What do you think we should do?
Well, my brother, you've hit the nail on the head. And it goes, in some cases, it goes worse than show. But also, in fairness, it hasn't been really done in a way that the environmentalists, especially the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, that's the biggest established, oldest conservation environment protection agency, NGO in the country. And what they have recommended is you need to do this tree planting very closely with the local community. You identify the types of trees that will be most beneficial to them. You know, and most trees are giving off one type of crop, one type of fruit or other. Identify those trees that are beneficial to them, that will do well in that area. And then you now hand over the whole activity to that particular local community, obviously with good financial support and maybe some good scientific advice and the best type of seedlings and so on, so that the community themselves will now adopt it. And unfortunately, what has been happening in the past is you get, one of our organizations from several hundred kilometers away will now come and do all the tree planting and then just leave it and maybe designate a few people to do a bit of watering and so on. And at the end of the day, boom, the seeds die off. Seedlings, especially in those areas, those drier areas, they need to be nurtured for sometimes 2, 3, even up to 4 years. So watering systems have to be put in place. Right. The knowledge of what needs to be done is there. We've seen it happen in other areas, and on small cases, we've seen it happen right here in Nigeria. FAID organization of Newton Jubono, NCF, and several other organizations have been doing it very effectively, but on far too small a scale.
All right.
So
thank you very much, Mr. Desmond Maje Kodumbi, an environmentalist and conservationist. Thank you for your mind-blowing analysis on the show today. Thank you very much for your time with us.
Thank you.
All right, Bikio. Do we really have a functioning flood management policy in Nigeria?
Well, every state has its own. Every state has its own idea of how to go about this, but generally, from the states that I've visited, I can say that we have a big flood problem in our country. And if we have a big flood problem in our country, it means that even if measures have been put in place, those measures are not working. Was it not 2 years ago that there was serious flooding in Katsina, and it swept away many homes, swept away people? Some corpses were recovered in Niger Republic and brought back to Nigeria. So there's a lot of flooding in Katsina State. So they've also had it this year. Zamfaratu, they've had flooding. I was there. I met with their commissioner on humanitarian affairs commissioner, Faika, the younger sister of Kadari Ahmed, and we talked about this. It's a problem that we face. The only thing is that this year the flood waters appear to have been let loose, in far more communities in our country than we usually experience. That's why everyone is worried, everyone is complaining. It has killed more than 100 people in Jigawa State, just to put it mildly. Some are even saying it's up to 200 people killed. How can we allow storm waters to kill that many people in our country? It shows that we need to do a lot. The drainage architecture of some states need to be looked at. Where they need to be expanded so that they can take in more water, they need to be expanded. Where you need to create primary, secondary, and tertiary channels, where you don't have them, you've got to do that. It's not every state that has done that. Mbalaji Johnson administration in Lagos State laid the foundation for what we now have in Lagos. And frankly, if Lagos should experience the scale of problem that they have in some of these states, where only forced local governments will escape from flooding, honestly, I don't know how we'll be able to cope. But thankfully, once it rains in Lagos, everybody will bring out their phones, they will record. After a few hours, the water has vanished. It is because of the drainage architecture that has been put in place.
Okay,
it's not in some of the northern states that I've visited. I've not seen where extensive primary, secondary, and tertiary drainage channels have been created. I've not seen anyone.
All right, Larry, quickly in a few seconds, taking a cue from what BK just said, what could be stopping other state governors from taking a cue from Lagos?
That's infrastructural. It's not something they can wish to come about. It's something that takes a lot of planning. The drainage system in Lagos is something government after government have been building upon. Right from the First Republic, you mentioned Baji Johnson, and it took time. All we can tell other state governments is to start now too. Start now, start mitigating the disasters that happen. And beyond the infrastructure, let's also try and help nature. We had the conservationists telling us, let's plant more trees. He said if we allow